The bronze key turned with a satisfying click, and Lora Martinez pressed her palm against the mahogany door of 1247 Willowbrook Lane. The weight of it surprised her. Solid, expensive, nothing like the hollow apartment doors she'd known for 32 years. The morning sun caught the stained glass panels flanking the entrance, casting jeweled light across her trembling fingers. Behind her, the moving truck rumbled to life, its driver already heading to his next delivery, leaving her alone with boxes, labeled kitchen, books, and mom's china, the last one written in her own careful handwriting just 3 months after the funeral. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She stepped inside, her heels echoing against Italian marble that cost more per square foot than she used to make in a month. The foyer stretched before her like a cathedral, complete with a crystal chandelier that threw rainbows across cream-colored walls. To her right, a grand staircase curved upward, its banister carved from what the realtor had called heritage oak. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibility, tinged with the faint scent of the white roses she'd had delivered yesterday. Her mother's favorite flowers, now arranged in a crystal vase on the entry table. "Jesus, Lora," she whispered too. The empty space then immediately felt guilty for taking the Lord's name in vain. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Mija, watch your language. You're better than that." Even now, with enough money to buy 10 houses like this one, she could still hear Maria Elena Martinez's gentle correction, still feel the phantom weight of her mother's hand smoothing her hair. The silence pressed against her eardrums, different from the apartment silence she'd grown accustomed to. This was the quiet of space, of rooms upon rooms waiting to be filled. She pulled out her phone, muscle memory guiding her to the family group chat she'd been avoiding for 3 days. 7 unread messages glowed on the screen, all from different combinations of her siblings. Elena: "Skip Easter this year. We want peace." Carlos: "Maybe it's better if you don't come. Too much drama." Sophia: "The kids are asking questions we don't know how to answer." Miguel: "Mom would want us to be happy. This isn't happiness." Each message was a small knife, precise and deliberate. She'd read them dozens of times, memorizing their exact wording, searching for hidden meanings or traces of the love that used to bind their family together. The last message, from Elena again, had arrived at 2:47 a.m. "We know you bought the house on Willowbrook." "Really? Right across from us? This has to stop, Lora." Lora looked through the tall windows flanking her front door, across the perfectly manicured street to the modest 2-story colonial where Elena lived with her husband Dave and their 3 children. The house where they'd all gathered every Easter, for the past 15 years, where her mother had taught her granddaughters to make empanadas, where Carlos brought his guitar and they'd sing the old songs until the neighbors complained. The house where, just last Easter, they'd all been a family. Now that same house felt like a fortress across enemy lines. She set her phone on the entry table next to the roses, screen down, and walked deeper into her new home. The living room opened before her, 20-foot ceilings soaring above furniture she'd ordered from catalogs without seeing in person. The leather sectional looked smaller than she'd imagined, dwarfed by the space around it. Above the marble fireplace hung a painting she'd commissioned, a landscape of the hills where she and her siblings had played as children, back when they lived in the cramped apartment near the freeway and shared 2 bedrooms between 5 kids. The painting looked lonely up there, too small for the wall, like a postcard trying to fill a billboard. "Mrs. Martinez?" A voice called from the kitchen, making her jump. "Sorry to startle you. I'm Janet from Merry Maids. We're just finishing up the deep clean you requested." Lora found Janet and 2 other women in her kitchen, a space that could have housed her entire childhood bedroom. Granite countertops gleamed under pendant lights, and the island was larger than the table where her family had shared meals for 20 years. Everything was perfect, pristine, and utterly foreign. "How does it look?" Lora asked, running her fingers along the cool granite. "Beautiful home," Janet said, spraying the already spotless sink. "Must be nice, having all this space. You have a big family?" The question hung in the air like incense. Laura's throat constricted. "Not really," she managed. "Just me." Janet's smile faltered slightly. "Well, you'll fill it up soon enough. House like this is meant for entertaining. Big Easter dinners, Christmas mornings with kids running around. You'll see." After the cleaning crew left, Lora climbed the stairs to the master suite, her hand trailing along the banister her mother would never touch. The bedroom was enormous, with a sitting area by the bay windows that overlooked the backyard. She'd had a gazebo installed there, white painted wood with climbing roses that would bloom in summer. Her mother had always wanted a garden, had made do with potted plants on their fire escape, nursing tomatoes and herbs in coffee cans and yogurt containers. "Look what I did, Mommy," Lora whispered to the empty room. "Look what your lottery ticket bought us." The numbers were burned into her memory. 7 to 14, 23, 31, 42. Powerball 18. Her mother had played the same numbers every week for 12 years. Birthdays of her children and grandchildren. 7 for Lora, 14 for Elena, 23 for Carlos, 31 for Sophia, 42 for Miguel. The Powerball was the date she'd arrived in America, March 18th, 1987, with 2 suitcases and a 3-year-old Lora clinging to her leg. "For the family," her mother had always said, folding the ticket carefully into her wallet. "When we win, it's for the family." But Maria Elena Martinez had died of a heart attack in the grocery store parking lot on a Tuesday morning, the winning ticket tucked in her purse beside her insulin and a grocery list written in careful Spanish. Lora had been the one to claim the prize, $47 million after taxes, enough to change everything, enough to ruin everything. She opened the windows, letting in the sound of children playing in Elena's backyard. Her nephew David's voice carried on the breeze, arguing with his sister about the rules of some game. The same voice that used to call her Tia Lora, with breathless excitement, who'd run to her car whenever she visited, desperate to show her his latest drawing or lost tooth. Now he probably didn't even know she lived across the street. Lora pulled out her laptop and opened the file she'd been working on for weeks. A letter she'd written and rewritten, trying to find words that would bridge the chasm that had opened between them. The cursor blinked at her, waiting. "Dear Elena, Carlos, Sophia, and Miguel. I know you don't want to hear from me right now. I know you think I stole something that belonged to all of us. But Mommy's ticket was in her purse, and legally." She deleted the last sentence. Legal didn't matter. Love mattered, and somehow, in trying to honor their mother's memory, she'd destroyed the very thing Maria Elena had treasured most, her family. The sound of a car door slamming drew her to the window. Elena was getting out of her minivan, wrestling with grocery bags and a toddler who clearly didn't want to be carried. She looked tired, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail, her shoulders hunched with the weight of everyday struggles that Lora now watched from behind bulletproof glass. Their eyes met across the street, just for a moment. Elena's expression shifted from fatigue to something harder. Hurt, anger, disappointment all mixed together. She looked away quickly, gathering her children and hurrying toward her front door as if Lora's gaze might contaminate them. Lora pressed her palm against the window, leaving a small fog print on the glass. In the distance, church bells were ringing. 6 o'clock, time for evening mass at Sacred Heart, where their mother had taken them every Sunday until they were old enough to complain. Where Maria Elena had lit candles for each of her children every week, praying for their health, their happiness, their success. Had she ever prayed for their unity? The house phone rang, startling her out of her reverie. She'd had it installed, more out of habit than necessity. Their mother had never owned a cell phone, had insisted that important calls came through landlines. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" Ms. Martinez? This is Patricia Henley from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if we could set up an interview about your lottery win and your plans for the money. Our viewers are always interested in local success stories. Laura's stomach dropped. I'm not interested in an interview. I understand you've been quite generous with local charities. That's exactly the kind of positive story we'd love to. No. Laura's voice was sharper than she intended. Please don't call again. She hung up, her hands shaking slightly. The media attention had been manageable at first, a brief mention in the paper, a few congratulatory messages from old coworkers. But as word spread about her donations, about the house, about the rift in her family, the interest had intensified. 3 reporters had shown up at her old apartment. Someone had published her donation records online, analyzing every dollar as if her grief were a spreadsheet to be audited. The sun was setting now, painting the sky the color of Elena's kitchen walls, a warm peach that had reminded their mother of the sunsets in Guadalajara. Lora made herself a cup of coffee in her state-of-the-art machine, the kind her mother had admired in magazines but never dreamed of owning. The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth, but it tasted like nothing at all. She carried it to the living room and sat on her expensive sofa, staring at the painting of their childhood hills. In the distance, she could hear Elena's family having dinner, the clink of silverware, children's laughter, the low murmur of adult conversation. Normal sounds from a normal family, the kind of family she used to belong to. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw you on the news. Congratulations on the win. Hope you're happy now. It was signed with a simple C. Carlos, her older brother, who used to carry her on his shoulders to see over crowds at street festivals. Carlos, who'd been so proud when she graduated nursing school, who'd named his son after their father and made her the godmother. The text felt like a benediction and a curse all at once. Outside, Elena's porch light came on, casting a warm glow, across the street that didn't quite reach Laura's windows. She wondered if her sister was thinking about her, if any of them lay awake at night wondering if they'd made the right choice. She wondered if they missed her the way she missed them, like a phantom limb, an ache that couldn't be soothed because the source of the pain was also the source of the healing. The lottery ticket had been meant to bring them together, to give them the financial freedom to support each other, to buy the big house where they could all gather for holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. Instead, it had become a wall between them, built from assumptions and hurt feelings, and words that couldn't be taken back. What would you do, Mommy? She asked the empty room, but the silence offered no answers. Only the echo of her own voice and the distant sound of Elena's children being called in for baths. As darkness fell over Willowbrook Lane, Lora sat in her mansion with her roses and her regrets, counting the cost of dreams that came true in ways you never expected. Tomorrow was Wednesday. In 11 days, it would be Easter, and for the first time in 32 years, she would spend it alone, unless something changed. Unless she found a way to build a bridge across a street that felt wider than the ocean her mother had crossed all those years ago, carrying nothing but hope and the belief that family was everything. The phone rang again. This time, she didn't answer. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through Laura's restless sleep at 5:30 a.m., the same time she'd been waking up for 15 years. Old habits carved deep grooves in the soul, even when the soul lived in a mansion now. She rolled over in her king-size bed, the first king-size bed she'd ever owned, and stared at the ceiling that seemed miles away in the pre-dawn darkness. The routine was sacred, even here, especially here. She padded to the kitchen in her worn slippers, the marble floor cold against her feet despite the heated tiles the contractor had insisted on installing. The coffee maker hummed to life with the push of a button, so different from the ancient percolator that had taken 20 minutes to brew a decent cup. Everything here was efficient, pristine, designed to make life easier. So why did everything Feels so much harder? While the coffee brewed, she opened her laptop at the kitchen island and began her morning ritual, checking the St. Mary's Hospital staff schedule she was no longer part of, reading medical journals she no longer needed for work, scrolling through nursing forums where her colleagues discussed cases and challenges that belonged to another lifetime. She'd been a charge nurse in the cardiac ICU for 8 years, the kind of nurse who knew every patient's birthday, who stayed late to hold hands with dying men who reminded her of her father, who brought homemade soup when her coworkers were sick. Now she was just another rich woman with too much time and not enough purpose. Her phone buzzed with a message from Amanda, her former supervisor. "Lora, we still have that position open if you change your mind." "The unit isn't the same without you," she typed and deleted 3 different responses. How could she explain that she wanted to come back, that she missed the controlled chaos of the ICU, the weight of responsibility that made every moment matter? How could she tell Amanda that winning the lottery had felt like losing herself? Instead, she closed the laptop and carried her coffee to the sunroom she'd had built off the kitchen. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Elena's house stirring to life. A light came on in the kitchen, then the living room. Soon, she'd see her sister shepherding 3 children through the morning routine. Breakfast, backpacks, the eternal hunt for missing shoes. Lora used to be part of that chaos. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, she'd stop by before her shift to help with the kids, braiding little Maria's hair while Elena packed lunches, listening to David practice his multiplication tables over bowls of cereal. The children had called her house Tia's place, even though it was just a 1-bedroom apartment with hand-me-down furniture and plants growing in empty coffee cans. She'd been somebody then, Tia Lora, who brought surprise treats and helped with homework. Who knew exactly what to say when Sophia's youngest scraped his knee, or when Carlos's teenager got his heart broken? Now she was just the woman in the big house across the street, the one who'd chosen money over family. Except she hadn't chosen. Had she? The guilt sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and impossible to dislodge. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Dr. Patricia Valdez, the grief counselor the hospital had recommended after her mother died. She'd only gone to 3 sessions before the lottery win had turned her world upside down. But Dr. Valdez had been kind, understanding, patient with Lora's tears and rage and the complicated emotions that came with losing the person who'd been both mother and father for most of her life. She typed, "Dr. Valdez, this is Lora Martinez. I know it's been a while, but I was wondering if you had any availability. I think I need to talk to someone." The sun was fully up now, painting Elena's yard in golden light. Lora watched her sister emerge from the house, herding children toward the minivan with the practiced efficiency of a woman who'd been doing this dance for 12 years. Little Maria, named for their grandmother, a fact that used to fill Lora with pride and now felt like another loss, dragged her backpack behind her, its contents spilling onto the driveway. Elena's movements were sharp, impatient. She was running. Late, probably had been since David was born, and turned their orderly lives into beautiful chaos. Lora found herself standing, one hand pressed against the window, watching her sister struggle with car seats and lunchboxes and the 1,000 small indignities of motherhood. Before she could think better of it, she was opening her back door, crossing the perfect lawn in her pajamas and robe, jogging across the street to where Elena stood, frazzled and frustrated, trying to convince 3-year-old Tommy to get in his car seat. "Here, let me," Lora began, reaching for Tommy's buckles. "Don't." Elena's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Don't help me. Don't make this easier and then disappear again." The words hit like a physical blow. Lora stepped back, suddenly aware that she was standing in the street in her pajamas, that Elena's neighbors were probably watching this drama unfold from behind their morning coffee and judgment. "Elena, You just what? Wanted to play the good sister? The helpful aunt?" Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears and exhaustion. You made your choice, Lora. You chose the money over us. You chose that house over this family, so don't stand there in your silk pajamas and pretend you care about my morning routine. I do care. Laura's voice broke on the words. I care about all of you. That's why you what? Built a mansion across from us? Like some kind of monument to what we used to be? Elena slammed Tommy's door harder than necessary, making him cry. You want to help? You want to care? Give the money back. Give it to charity. Give it to the church. I don't care. But don't keep it and expect us to pretend everything's fine. She got into the driver's seat without another word, reversing out of the driveway with the jerky movements of someone trying not to lose control completely. Lora stood in the street, barefoot on cold asphalt, watching the minivan disappear around the corner. A door opened across the street, and Mrs. Peterson emerged with her golden retriever, Bailey. The older woman had been Elena's neighbor for 6 years, had watched Elena's children grow up, had probably heard the argument through her kitchen window. Morning, dear, Mrs. Peterson called, her voice carefully neutral. Lovely day, isn't it? Lora managed a wave and hurried back to her house, shame burning hot in her cheeks. Inside, she leaned against the closed door and let the tears come. Tears she'd been holding back for 3 months, tears that tasted like regret and confusion and the bitter knowledge that good intentions could destroy everything you held dear. Her phone rang. Dr. Valdez, calling back already. Lora, I got your message. How are you holding up? I don't know, Lora whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought... She stopped, unable to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. Would you like to come in today? I have an opening at 2 o'clock? Yes, please. After she hung up, Lora walked through her empty house, her footsteps echoing in rooms that were meant to be filled with laughter and conversation. She stopped in the dining room, where a table, for 12, sat surrounded by chairs that had never been occupied. Above it, a chandelier caught the morning light, casting tiny rainbows across walls decorated with family photos from before. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, the Easter when Carlos had convinced everyone to dress like bunnies and pose for a ridiculous picture that had made their mother laugh until she cried. In the photo, they were all pressed together on Elena's couch, a tangle of arms and faces and pure, uncomplicated joy. Laura's younger self grinned at the camera, surrounded by the people who loved her most in the world. She'd been a different person then, poorer in money, richer in belonging. She traced her finger along the glass, wondering if it was possible to go backward, to undo the choices that had led her here. But the lottery ticket couldn't be unbought. The money couldn't be unwon, and her mother couldn't be undead. All she could do was figure out how to move forward in a world that felt fundamentally broken. The mailbox flag was up when she went to get the newspaper, still delivered in physical form, another remnant of her mother's preferences that she couldn't quite abandon. Along with bills and advertisements, there was a thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside, she found photocopies of newspaper articles about lottery winners, each one highlighted in yellow marker. Lottery winner dies alone after family dispute. $1 million curse, when winning means losing everything. The dark side of lucky numbers, families torn apart by sudden wealth. A note was paperclipped to the last article, written in careful block letters. This could be you? Is it worth it? Laura's hand shook as she read through the articles, each one a variation on the same theme. Families destroyed by money, winners who traded love for luxury and regretted it too late. Some had signed the article's margins with their initials, as if creating a club of the formerly lucky, the rich but broken, the winners who'd lost everything that mattered. She threw the articles in the trash, then immediately pulled them back, out. Someone had taken the time to find these stories, to compile them, to mail them to her without revealing their identity. Someone who either cared enough to warn her or cruel enough to torment her. Either way, they weren't wrong. That afternoon, she sat in Dr. Valdez's familiar office, surrounded by the same soothing blue walls and inspirational quotes that had comforted her 3 months ago. But this time, instead of grieving her mother's death, she was grieving the death of her family, a death she might have caused. "Tell me about the morning," Dr. Valdez said, her pen poised over a legal pad that already contained 3 pages of notes. Lora recounted the scene in the street, Elena's words, the weight of standing there in her pajamas while her world crumbled a little more. "She's not wrong," she finished. "I did choose the money. I chose to keep it instead of giving it away. I chose to buy that house. I chose all of this." "Did you? Or did you choose to honor your mother's wish for her family to be taken care of?" "My family doesn't want to be taken care of. They want to be left alone." Dr. Valdez set down her pen and leaned forward slightly. "Lora, what do you think your mother would want you to do right now, in this moment?" The question hung in the air like incense. Lora closed her eyes and tried to conjure her mother's voice. Tried to imagine Maria Elena Martinez sitting in this very chair, dispensing the kind of wisdom that had gotten her through 43 years of life in a country that wasn't born in, raising 5 children mostly alone, building a family from nothing but love and stubbornness and the unshakable belief that they belonged to each other. "She'd want us to be together," Lora whispered. "She'd want us to forgive each other. And what would she say about the money? She'd say it was meant for all of us. She'd say, family comes first, always." Lora opened her eyes, meeting Dr. Valdez's gentle gaze. "But she's not here to say it." "No, she's not. So now you have to decide what her love means to you. Does it mean keeping the money because it was her ticket? Or does it mean giving it up to keep the family she valued above everything else?" Lora drove home in a daze, Dr. Valdez's words echoing in her mind. The therapist was right, of course. This wasn't really about the money. It was about grief and guilt and the impossible weight of trying to carry someone else's dreams when your own world was falling apart. She parked in her circular driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the house that was supposed to represent everything her mother had wanted for them: security, comfort, a place where the whole family could gather without worrying about space or money or whether there would be enough food to go around. Instead, it was a mausoleum, beautiful and empty, and haunted by everything it was supposed to fix. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Elena told us about this morning. This has to stop, Lora. You're hurting her kids. They don't understand why Tia Lora lives across the street, but never visits." Another message, this one from Sophia. "Miguel wants to call the police about harassment. I told him no, but he's serious. Please, just leave us alone." Lora typed and deleted a dozen responses, each one more desperate than the last. How could she explain that she wasn't trying to harass them? That every day in this house was a reminder of how badly she'd misunderstood what love looked like? That she'd bought the house across the street not to torment them, but because she couldn't bear to be too far away from the only family she'd ever known? Finally, she typed, "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just miss you all so much." She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. Showing weakness wouldn't help. Showing pain wouldn't bridge the gap. It would only make them feel worse about their decision to shut her out, and guilt was a poor foundation for rebuilding a relationship. No one replied. That evening, she ordered takeout from the Mexican restaurant where their mother used to work weekends to make extra money. The same restaurant where Elena had had her quinceañera party, where Carlos had proposed to his wife, where they'd all gathered for impromptu celebrations when someone got a promotion, or passed a test, or needed comfort food and family faces. The delivery driver was new, didn't recognize her name or know that she used to be part of a loud, loving family that kept the kitchen staff entertained with their stories and arguments and laughter. He just saw another rich woman in a big house, tipping generously to assuage guilt he couldn't begin to understand. Lora ate her mother's favorite dish, mole poblano with rice and beans, at her dining table for 12, surrounded by empty chairs and the echo of conversations that would never happen. Through the window, she could see Elena's house, warmly lit, curtains drawn against the evening, and the neighbor who'd become a stranger. She was finishing her meal when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a figure in shadows, backlit by her porch light. When she opened the door, she found David, Elena's 10-year-old son, standing on her step with a folded piece of paper clutched in his small fist. "David? What are you—" "Mom doesn't know I'm here," he whispered, glancing back toward his house. "She said I'm not supposed to talk to you anymore, but I wanted to give you this." He thrust the paper at her and ran back across the street, disappearing into the safety of his front door before Lora could call after him. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands and found a crayon drawing of their family, stick figures, holding hands in front of two houses, one small and one large. Above the drawing, in careful child handwriting, "I miss Tia Lora. Why can't we be a family anymore?" At the bottom of the page, in even smaller letters, "P.S. Tommy asks for you every night before bed." Lora sank onto her front steps, David's drawing clutched against her chest, and finally let herself cry the way she'd needed to cry since the day her mother died, and left her with a winning lottery ticket and no instruction manual for how to keep a family together when sudden wealth threatened to tear them apart. The night air was cool against her tear-stained cheeks, carrying the scent of Elena's roses and the sound of children's laughter from down the street. Somewhere, in the distance, church bells chimed 10 o'clock, marking another day in her exile, another 24 hours in the house that money had built but love couldn't fill. Tomorrow, she would figure out what came next. Tonight she would sit on her marble steps and remember what it felt like to be someone's beloved sister, someone's cherished aunt, someone's daughter. Tomorrow, she would find a way to be all of those things again, even if it meant giving up everything she'd thought she wanted. The local newspaper arrived with Thursday morning's coffee, and Lora's face stared back at her from the front page. The headline read, "Local lottery winners' generous donations spark community debate," and below it, a photograph someone had taken of her leaving the St. Vincent de Paul charity office 3 weeks ago, her arms full of papers and her expression carefully neutral. She hadn't agreed to the interview. She'd specifically declined all media requests. But there it was, her life dissected in black and white, her donations itemized like evidence in a trial she didn't know she was facing. Martinez, 32, a former cardiac ICU nurse, has donated over $2.3 million to local charities in the past 3 months, including substantial gifts to Sacred Heart Catholic Church, the Regional Food Bank, and the Children's Hospital Foundation. While community leaders praise her generosity, some question whether her giving spree is genuine philanthropy or an attempt to rehabilitate her image following reports of a family rift over the lottery winnings. Her hands shook as she read. The article, which quoted family sources, saying that Maria Elena Martinez had always intended the lottery ticket to benefit all her children equally. It mentioned the house on Willowbrook Lane, described as an ostentatious display of wealth that has created tension in the previously quiet neighborhood. Worst of all, it included a quote from someone identified only as a close family friend, who said, "Lora thinks money can solve everything, but you can't buy forgiveness." The coffee tasted bitter as medicine as she scrolled through the online version of the article, reading comment after comment from strangers who felt entitled to judge her choices, her character, her very existence. If my sister won the lottery, on Mom's ticket I'd expect my share too. Greedy. Good for her for giving to charity. At least someone's trying to do the right thing. Typical rich person guilt. Too little, too late. I drive by that house every day, completely out of place in that neighborhood. Talk about showing off. Her phone rang before she could process the full weight of the comments section. Father, Miguel Reyes, the priest from Sacred Heart who'd officiated at her mother's funeral, sounded tired and apologetic. Lora, mija, I'm so sorry about the article. They called asking about your donations, and I thought they were doing a positive story about community generosity. I had no idea they would. It's not your fault, Father. Lora's voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. I should have expected this. The reporter, she kept asking about your family situation. I told her it wasn't my place to comment on personal matters, but he sighed heavily. Some people in the parish are talking. You know how it is. She did know. She'd grown up in this community, had watched the way gossip moved through church pews and grocery store aisles like wildfire. Her mother had always said that people's business was God's business, not theirs. But Maria Elena Martinez had been a saint. Most people weren't. After hanging up, Lora sat in her silent kitchen and tried to imagine facing the congregation at Sunday Mass, the weight of curious stares and whispered judgments. She'd been attending Sacred Heart her entire life, had been confirmed in that church, had sat in the same pew every Sunday beside her mother and siblings. Now that pew held strangers, and she was the stranger too. The doorbell rang at 10:30, followed immediately by insistent knocking. Through the peephole, she saw a young woman with a camera crew, perfectly styled hair whipping in the morning breeze. Ms. Martinez, I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 5 News. I was hoping we could get your response to the allegations in today's article. Lora didn't answer, but the woman continued talking to the closed door. Specifically, we'd like to know if you plan to share the lottery winnings with your siblings and whether your recent charitable donations are an attempt to deflect criticism. About keeping the money for yourself? The questions felt like accusations, each one more pointed than the last. Lora retreated to the sunroom, but she could still hear the reporter's voice carrying across her lawn, performing for the camera, turning her private pain into public entertainment. From her windows, she watched Elena's house with growing dread. Sure enough, another news van pulled up 20 minutes later, and she saw her sister's front. Skip Easter this year. We want peace, they texted. When they saw my new mansion. Next door. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of crystal-clear sky that made everything seem possible. Lora stood at her bedroom window at dawn, watching the media crews set up their equipment. In the hospital parking lot where she'd once hurried between shifts, where she'd said goodbye to colleagues who might never understand the woman she'd become. She'd chosen St. Mary's Hospital for the press conference deliberately. This was where she'd learned to save lives, where she'd held the hands of dying patients and comforted their families, where she'd discovered that her purpose wasn't tied to her paycheck, but to her ability to show up when people needed her most. If she was going to bare her soul to the world, it would be in a place that remembered who she'd been before the lottery ticket changed everything. The navy blue dress she'd chosen was simple, professional, the kind she used to wear to hospital, board meetings when she advocated for better staffing ratios or equipment upgrades. Her mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry Maria Elena had ever owned, caught the morning light as she checked her reflection one last time. Give me strength, Mommy, she whispered to the empty room, touching the small silver cross at her throat that her mother had given her for her confirmation 20 years ago. Amanda met her in the hospital's main lobby, looking professional but warm in her administrator's suit. You ready for this? She asked, squeezing Lora's hand. I don't think anyone's ever ready to confess their mistakes to the entire city, Lora replied, managing a weak smile. But I'm ready to try. The conference room was packed beyond capacity. Local reporters, camera crews, hospital administrators, and, most surprisingly, several dozen hospital employees who'd come to support her. Lora recognized faces from the ICU, the emergency department, the pediatric ward where she'd sometimes helped during staff shortages. People who knew her work, her character, her heart. Dr. Sarah Kim, the hospital's chief of staff, introduced her with words that brought tears to Lora's eyes. Lora Martinez served this hospital and our community for over 8 years with distinction, compassion, and unwavering dedication to her patients. While she's no longer employed here, she remains part of our family, and we stand with her today as she addresses this difficult situation. The applause felt like absolution. Lora approached the podium with hands that trembled only slightly, her prepared notes folded in her pocket, but her heart full of words she'd never written down. She looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some sympathetic, some openly skeptical, and took a breath that seemed to come from her very soul. "My name is Lora Martinez," she began, her voice stronger than she'd expected. 3 months ago, I was a cardiac ICU nurse at this hospital, living in a 1-bedroom apartment and worrying about student loans and car payments like millions of other Americans. Today, I'm standing here as someone the media has labeled everything from a generous philanthropist to a family destroyer, and I want to tell you the truth about both of those things. She paused, making eye contact with a reporter in the front row whose expression had shifted from professional cynicism to genuine attention. On December 15th, my mother, Maria Elena Martinez, died of a sudden heart attack in the grocery store parking lot where she'd just bought milk, bread, and her weekly lottery ticket. She was 64 years old, a woman who'd raised 5 children, mostly alone after my father died when I was 7, a woman who worked 2 jobs for most of her adult life and never complained about the sacrifices she made for her family. The room was completely silent now, the clicking of camera shutters the only sound. The lottery numbers she played every week were our birthdays, her children's and grandchildren's birthdays. 7 for me, 14 for Elena, 23 for Carlos, 31 for Sophia, 42 for Miguel. The Powerball number was 18, the date she arrived in this country 38 years ago with a 3-year-old daughter and nothing but hope that America would give us a better life. Lora's voice caught slightly, but she continued. She always said, "When we win, it's for the family." Every week, the same words. For 12 years, the same hope. She never won more than $20 until the week she died, when those numbers, our numbers, finally came through. She pulled out her phone and showed a photo of the winning ticket, now laminated and kept in her mother's Bible. This ticket was in her purse when she died. Legally, ethically, by every measure the courts and lawyers and financial advisors could apply, it belonged to her estate, which meant it belonged to me as her executor. A reporter in the back raised her hand, but Lora shook her head gently. "Please let me finish. I thought I was honoring her wishes by claiming the prize. I thought I was being responsible by investing it wisely, by donating to causes she cared about, by buying a house where our whole family could gather for holidays and celebrations. I thought..." Her voice broke completely. "I thought I was being the daughter she raised me to be." She took a moment to compose herself, aware that every emotion was being broadcast live to thousands of people who'd been following this story like a soap opera. But I was wrong. Not about the legalities, not about my right to the money, but about what my mother's words really meant. When she said "for the family," she didn't mean for one person to decide how to take care of everyone else. She meant for all of us together to share in the blessing she'd been praying for all those years. The admission hung in the air like a confession at Sunday Mass. My siblings asked me to split the winnings equally among all 5 of us. I said no, not because I was greedy, but because I was grieving and scared and convinced that I knew better than they did about how to handle sudden wealth. I'd read articles about lottery winners who lost everything, families torn apart by money, people who ended up worse off than they started. I thought I was protecting them from making mistakes. She looked directly into the closest camera, knowing that Elena and her brothers and sister were probably watching from across town. I was protecting myself. I was protecting my grief, my sense of control, my need to be the one who took care of everyone instead of admitting that I needed taking care of too. I was so afraid of losing my mother's memory that I ended up losing her children, my siblings, my nieces and nephews. the only family I've ever known. A hand went up in the audience. Rebecca Chen from Channel 5, the reporter who'd been camped outside her house for days. Ms. Martinez, are you saying you're prepared to give up the money now? Lora nodded, reaching into her pocket for a document she'd had prepared by her attorney. This morning, before this press conference, I signed papers establishing the Elena Martinez Family Trust. The remaining lottery funds, approximately $42 million after taxes and my donations, will be divided equally among my mother's 5 children. Each of us will receive about $8.4 million. The room erupted in murmurs and rapid note-taking. Lora waited for the noise to die down before continuing. But money isn't what I'm hoping to win back today. I'm hoping to win back my family. I'm hoping that Elena will let me help her with her children again, that Carlos will invite me to his son's baseball games, that Sophia will call me when she needs someone to talk to, that Miguel will let me be the big sister I used to be. Another reporter stood up. What about the house? The mansion? You bought across from your sister? I'm selling it, Lora said simply. I never should have built a monument to my grief in my sister's front yard. It was selfish and hurtful and accomplished the exact opposite of what I intended. The proceeds from the sale will go to additional charitable causes my mother supported. Where will you live? I don't know yet. Maybe I'll rent a small apartment near the hospital and ask Dr. Kim if there are any openings in the ICU. She smiled at her former boss, who nodded encouragingly. Maybe I'll figure out how to be Lora Martinez the nurse again, instead of Lora Martinez the lottery winner. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, each one giving her an opportunity to reveal more of the truth she'd been hiding behind marble columns and crystal chandeliers. She talked about the loneliness of wealth without love, the weight of making decisions that affected people who wouldn't let her explain her reasoning, the crushing realization that good intentions could cause as much damage as malicious ones. She talked about her mother's dreams, not just of financial security, but of a united family that supported each other through everything life could throw at them. She talked about the immigrant experience, the way Maria Elena had sacrificed everything for her children's futures, the guilt that came with achieving success that your parents never lived to see. Most importantly, she talked about forgiveness, the kind she hoped to receive from her siblings, and the kind she was finally ready to offer herself. When the press conference ended, the hospital employees surrounded her with hugs and words of support that felt like coming home. Dr. Kim pulled her aside and whispered, "Your position is waiting for you whenever you're ready to come back. The cardiac unit needs someone with your heart." Amanda walked her to the parking garage, shielding her from the reporters who were still shouting questions. "How do you feel?" she asked as they reached Lora's car. "Terrified," Lora admitted, "and relieved, and like I might throw up." That sounds about right for someone who just changed their entire life on live television. As Lora drove home through streets lined with people who'd seen her confession, her phone began buzzing with messages. The first few were from reporters requesting follow-up interviews, but then she saw names she'd been hoping to see for months. Carlos. "Watching now. We need to talk." Sophia. "That was brave, Hermana. Really brave." Miguel. "I'm proud of you, Lora. Mom would be proud too." And finally, the message that made her pull over to the side of the road because her vision was too blurred with tears to drive safely. Elena. "Come home. The kids want to see their tia Lora." She sat in her car on the shoulder of Maple Avenue, crying the kind of tears that wash everything clean. Grief and relief and hope all mixed together in a flood that felt like baptism. Around her, the world continued its normal Monday rhythm. But for Lora Martinez, everything had changed in the space of an hour-long press conference. She drove home to Willowbrook Lane for what might be the last time as a resident. The news vans were already packing up, the story moving on to its next phase, now that the dramatic revelation had been broadcast to the world. Her mansion sat empty and somehow smaller than It had that morning, no longer a symbol of success, but simply an expensive mistake that could finally be corrected. Across the street, Elena's front door opened before Lora could even get out of her car. 3 small figures came running across the lawn: David, little Maria, and Tommy, who'd grown so much in the months since she'd seen him that she almost didn't recognize her youngest nephew, Tia Lora. David reached her first, throwing his arms around her waist with the uncomplicated love of a child who didn't understand adult pride or sibling rivalry, who only knew that his favorite aunt was back. "We saw you on TV," Maria whispered, her 7-year-old voice full of awe. Mom cried. Tommy, now 3.5, studied Laura's face with the serious expression he'd inherited from Elena. "Are you going to live in the little house now?" he asked, pointing to Elena's modest colonial. "I don't know, baby," Lora said, kneeling to his level. "Would you like that?" "Yes. The big house is too far away." From the front porch, Elena watched this reunion with an expression Lora couldn't read. Her sister looked older, more tired than she had just a few months ago, worn down by the stress of media attention and family discord, and the weight of raising 3 children while her husband worked overtime to pay the mortgage. Slowly, Elena walked across the lawn to where Lora knelt, surrounded by children who'd never stopped loving their aunt, despite the complicated adult drama that had separated them. "We watched the whole thing," Elena said quietly. "Carlos and Sofia and Miguel came over. We all watched together." "And?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "And I remembered why Mommy always said you had the biggest heart in the family. Even when you're wrong, even when you make terrible decisions, you're wrong for the right reasons." "I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm sorry for all of it. The money, the house, the media circus, the way I handled everything. I thought I was taking care of everyone, but I was really just trying to control everything." "I know." Elena reached out and took her sister's hand. "I know you were. And I'm sorry too. Sorry for shutting you out instead of fighting for us to work it out together. Sorry for letting pride get in the way of love. Sorry for keeping the kids away from someone who's never been anything but good to them." They held each other in the middle of Willowbrook Lane, 2 sisters who'd lost their way and found each other again, surrounded by children who'd been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. "Is it really over?" Elena asked. "The anger, and the hurt and the silence?" "If you want it to be," Lora whispered. "I want to come home, Elena. I want to be part of this family again." "Then come inside. Carlos is making coffee, and Sofia brought flan, and Miguel's trying to explain cryptocurrency to the kids for some reason. It's loud and chaotic, and exactly the way Mommy would want it." As they walked toward the house that had been home long, before Lora had enough money to buy any house she wanted, David slipped his hand into hers and asked the question that mattered most. "Will you help me with my math homework, Tia Lora?" "Every day if you want me to," she promised, and for the first time in months, that felt like wealth beyond measure. 6 months later, Lora stood in the same hospital conference room where she'd confessed her mistakes to the world, but this time, she wore scrubs instead of a navy dress, and the cameras belonged to the hospital's internal communications team rather than news crews hunting for drama. The Martinez Family Cardiac Care Endowment has already funded 2 new state-of-the-art monitoring systems and provided scholarships for 3 nursing students from underserved communities, Dr. Kim announced to the small gathering of hospital staff and board members. This partnership with the Martinez family represents exactly the kind of community investment that saves lives. Lora shifted uncomfortably at the word partnership, though she supposed that's what it had become. After the trust was established and the money divided, her siblings had insisted on creating something meaningful together, a way to honor their mother's memory while addressing the healthcare disparities she'd witnessed during her own final years of managing diabetes and heart disease. Carlos, now wearing a suit instead of construction clothes for his role as the endowment's project manager, stood to address the group. "Our mother worked in healthcare for 15 years before she had to cut back her hours to take care of our father. She understood the difference that good equipment and well-trained staff could make. This endowment isn't just about money, it's about making sure other families don't lose their mothers to treatable conditions. The applause was warm but brief. This wasn't a celebration, but a working meeting, the kind of practical gathering their mother would have appreciated. Elena, serving as the endowment's community outreach coordinator, presented statistics about maternal mortality rates in their zip code. Sophia, who'd used part of her share to finish her accounting degree, walked them through the financial projections. Miguel, the youngest and most tech-savvy, had created a database to track the endowment's impact over time. They were a team again, united by purpose rather than proximity, working together in ways that felt both new and familiar. The money had made it possible, but the reconciliation had made it meaningful. After the meeting, Lora changed back into her street clothes and walked through the hospital corridors she'd missed more than she'd realized. The cardiac ICU looked exactly the same, monitors beeping their reassuring rhythms, nurses moving with practiced efficiency, families maintaining their vigilant bedside watches. "Martinez, you're in room 314 today," Amanda called out, handing her a patient chart without looking up from her computer. The casual normalcy of it still surprised Lora sometimes. She'd been back at work for 4 months now, but part of her kept expecting someone to treat her differently, to acknowledge the strange journey that had brought her back to where she started. Instead, her colleagues had simply welcomed her home and put her to work. The lottery win was old news now, replaced by newer scandals and fresher drama. Most days, she was just Lora the nurse again, which was exactly what she'd wanted. Room 314 housed Mrs. Dorothy Chen, a 72-year-old woman recovering from triple bypass surgery. Her daughter Jennifer sat beside the bed, laptop balanced, on her knees, trying to manage work emails while monitoring her mother's every breath. "How's she doing today?" Lora asked, checking the monitors with practiced eyes. "Better, I think. The doctor said she might be able to go home next week." Jennifer looked up from her computer with exhausted relief. "I don't know what I would have done if—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Sorry. I know you hear this all the time." "I never get tired of hearing that someone's mother is going to be okay," Lora said gently, adjusting Mrs. Chen's blankets. "It's why I do this job." It was true, but it was also incomplete. She did the job because she was good at it, because it gave her purpose, because saving lives felt like a prayer made tangible. But she also did it now because she understood, in ways she hadn't before, how quickly everything could change, how precious ordinary moments could be, how easily families could fragment under the weight of good intentions and poor communication. Every patient reminded her of her mother. Every worried family member reminded her of herself, sitting in similar chairs, asking similar questions, hoping for similar miracles that sometimes came and sometimes didn't. During her lunch break, she drove to the small apartment she'd rented, 3 blocks from Elena's house, a 2-bedroom place with original hardwood floors and windows that actually opened, where the neighbors knew each other's names and children played in the shared backyard. It wasn't luxurious, but it was home in ways the mansion had never been. The apartment was filled with furniture from her old place and new pieces her siblings had helped her choose. Elena's children had drawn pictures that covered the refrigerator. Carlos had built custom shelves for her books. Sophia had contributed a hand-knitted afghan that draped perfectly over the second-hand couch Miguel had found on Craigslist. Her mother's china sat in a simple cabinet in the dining nook, no longer waiting for special occasions that might never come. Lora used the good plates for everyday meals now, understanding finally that life itself was the special occasion worth celebrating. The mailbox held the usual collection of bills and advertisements, along with a thick envelope from the documentary filmmaker who'd been following their story for the past 6 months. Derek Walsh had kept his promise to tell their story fairly, focusing not on the drama of family discord, but on the complexity of sudden wealth and the power of forgiveness. The envelope contained a DVD labeled Preview Copy, The Martinez Family Story, and a note, "Lora, here's the rough cut for your family's review. We've scheduled the premiere for next month at the Chicago International Documentary Festival. I hope you'll all be able to attend. This film wouldn't exist without your courage to tell the truth, even when it was difficult. Thank you for trusting us with your story." Derek, that evening, all 5 Martinez siblings gathered in Elena's living room to watch the documentary together. The children were in bed, Dave was working a night shift, and the house was filled with the comfortable chaos of adults trying to share one bowl of popcorn and argue about the volume setting. The film opened with footage of their old neighborhood, the apartment building where they'd grown up, interviews with former neighbors who remembered Elena Martinez as a woman who never missed church, never complained about her circumstances, and never lost faith that her children would have better lives than she did. "She used to say that she came to America so her kids could dream bigger than her dreams," said Mrs. Rodriguez, their former neighbor who still lived in the same apartment after 30 years. "She worked so hard for those children, cleaning offices, at night, taking care of other people's kids during the day, but she always made time for her own." The documentary showed home videos none of them had seen. In Muir Section 3, Escalation and Conflict. The local newspaper arrived with Thursday morning's coffee, and Lora's face stared back at her from the front page. The headline read, "Local lottery winners' generous donations spark community debate," and below it, a photograph someone had taken of her leaving the St. Vincent de Paul charity office 3 weeks ago. Her arms full of papers, and her expression carefully neutral. She hadn't agreed to the interview. She'd specifically declined all media requests. But there it was. Her life dissected in black and white, her donations itemized like evidence in a trial she didn't know she was facing. Martinez, 32, a former cardiac ICU nurse, has donated over $2.3 million to local charities in the past 3 months, including substantial gifts to Sacred Heart Catholic Church, the Regional Food Bank, and the Children's Hospital Foundation. While community leaders praise her generosity, some question whether her giving spree is genuine philanthropy or an attempt to rehabilitate her image following reports of a family rift over the lottery winnings. Her hands shook as she read the article, which quoted family sources, saying that Elena Martinez had always intended the lottery ticket to benefit all her children equally. It mentioned the house on Willowbrook Lane, described as an ostentatious display of wealth that has created tension in the previously quiet neighborhood. Worst of all, it included a quote from someone identified only as a close family friend, who said, "Lora thinks money can solve everything, but you can't buy forgiveness." The coffee tasted bitter as medicine as she scrolled through the online version of the article, reading comment after comment from strangers who felt entitled to judge her choices, her character, her very existence. "If my sister won the lottery, on Mom's ticket, I'd expect my share too. Greedy. Good for her for giving to charity. At least someone's trying to do the right thing. Typical rich person guilt. Too little, too late. I drive by that house every day. Completely out of place in that neighborhood. Talk about showing off." Her phone rang before she could process the full weight of the comments section. Father Miguel Reyes, the priest from Sacred Heart who'd officiated at her mother's funeral, sounded tired and apologetic. "Lora, mija, I'm so sorry about the article. They called asking about your donations and I thought they were doing a positive story about community generosity. I had no idea they would—" "It's not your fault, Father." Lora's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I should have expected this. The reporter, she kept asking about your family situation. I told her it wasn't my place to comment on personal matters, but—" He sighed heavily. "Some people in the parish are talking. You know how it is." She did know. She'd grown up in this community, had watched the way gossip moved through church pews and grocery store aisles like wildfire. Her mother had always said that people's business was God's business, not theirs. But Elena Martinez had been a saint. Most people weren't. After hanging up, Lora sat in her silent kitchen and tried to imagine facing the congregation at Sunday Mass, the weight of curious stares and whispered judgments. She'd been attending Sacred Heart her entire life, had been confirmed in that church, had sat in the same pew every Sunday beside her mother and siblings. Now that pew held strangers, and she was the stranger too. The doorbell rang at 10:30, followed immediately by insistent knocking. Through the peephole, she saw a young woman with a camera crew, perfectly styled hair whipping in the morning breeze. "Ms. Martinez? I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 5 News. I was hoping we could get your response to the allegations in today's article." Lora didn't answer, but the woman continued talking to the closed door. "Specifically, we'd like to know if you plan to share the lottery winnings with your siblings and whether your recent charitable donations are an attempt to deflect criticism about keeping the money for yourself." The questions felt like accusations, each one more pointed than the last. Lora retreated to the sunroom, but she could still hear the reporter's voice carrying across her lawn, performing for the camera, turning her private pain into public entertainment. From her windows, she watched Elena's house with growing dread. Sure enough, another news van pulled up 20 minutes later, and she saw her sister's front door open just long enough for Elena to shout, "No comment!" before slamming it shut again. The reporters didn't leave. They set up camp on both sides of Willowbrook Lane, their cameras trained on both houses like some twisted version of a documentary about suburban warfare. Lora watched neighbors emerge from their homes, some offering coffee to the news crews, others shooing them away from their property lines. Mrs. Peterson walked Bailey past the chaos with her chin held high, shooting disapproving looks at both houses as if Lora and Elena were equally responsible for bringing this circus to their quiet street. By noon, the situation had escalated beyond anything Lora could have imagined. A social media influencer with 500,000 followers had picked up the story, posting a TikTok video titled, "Rich Sister versus Poor Family. Who's Wrong?" that garnered 200,000 views in 2 hours. The comments section was a battlefield of strangers, choosing sides in a family feud they knew nothing about. Lora's phone buzzed constantly, unknown numbers, reporters, producers from talk shows wanting her to tell her side of the story. She stopped answering after the 15th call, but they kept coming, filling her voicemail with increasingly desperate pleas for interviews, exclusives, her version of events. Around 2 o'clock, she saw Carlos's pickup truck pull up in front of Elena's house. Her older brother emerged looking thunderous, his work clothes dusty from the construction site where he'd been employed for 12 years. Behind him came Sophia and her husband Robert, both of them moving with the grim determination of people, preparing for battle. 20 minutes later, all 4 of her siblings were standing on Elena's front porch, presenting a united front to the cameras that immediately swiveled in their direction. Carlos stepped forward first, his voice carrying across the street with the authority of the oldest child, the one who'd stepped into their father's role when Roberto Martinez had died of a heart attack when Lora was only 7. "We're here to set the record straight," he said, looking directly into the nearest camera. "Our mother, Maria Elena Martinez, played the same lottery numbers every week for 12 years. She always said that if she won, it would be for the family, all of us, together. She never intended for one person to keep everything while the rest of us struggled to pay bills and raise our children." Elena stepped forward next, her voice shaking slightly but her words clear. "Our sister Lora has chosen money over family. She's chosen to live in a mansion across the street from us instead of honoring our mother's wishes. She's turned our mother's dream into a nightmare, and we want everyone to know that we never asked for charity. We asked for fairness." Sophia was crying as she spoke, her voice breaking on every other word. "We just want our sister back. We want the Lora who used to help with homework and birthday parties and scraped knees. We want the aunt our children used to love, not this stranger who thinks expensive gifts can replace presents. who thinks writing checks can replace showing up. Miguel, the youngest at 28, looked directly at Lora's house as he spoke. If you're watching this, Lora, if you're in there hiding behind your marble columns and your crystal chandeliers, please remember who you used to be. Remember the woman who held Mom's hand in the hospital, who promised her you'd take care of all of us. This isn't taking care of us. This is abandoning us. The cameras captured every tear, every tremor in their voices, every moment of pain that Lora's choices had caused. She watched from her living room window, her heart breaking with each word, knowing that her siblings were right and wrong and justified and cruel all at the same time. After they went back inside Elena's house, the reporters turned their attention back to Lora's property. They interviewed Mrs. Peterson. Such a shame, really. They used to be such a close family. The mailman. She tips well, but she never talks to anyone. And even the landscaping crew that maintained her perfect lawn. She pays triple rate, but watches us work from the window like she's afraid we'll steal something. Each interview was another small knife, another piece of evidence in the prosecution of her character. She was the rich sister, the greedy one, the family destroyer. It didn't matter that she'd donated millions to charity, that she lay awake every night missing them so much it felt like dying, that she would have gladly traded every dollar for one more Sunday dinner with her family intact. The story made the evening news on 3 different channels, each one adding their own spin. Channel 7 focused on the charitable angle. Lottery winner gives back, but family says it's not enough. Channel 12 went with the human interest approach. Family feud over lottery millions tears siblings apart. Channel 5, Rebecca Chen's station, took the investigative route. Questions arise over lottery winners' claims to entire jackpot. That last report was the most damaging. They'd somehow gotten hold of security footage from the grocery store where Maria Elena had bought the winning ticket, showing her mother's final moments, purchasing milk, bread, and her weekly lottery ticket with the same numbers she'd played for over a decade. The footage was grainy, black and white, but unmistakably her mother's careful movements, her deliberate choice to buy just one ticket, her methodical way of checking the numbers before folding it into her purse. The question, Rebecca Chen said, in her perfectly modulated news voice, is whether Mrs. Martinez intended this ticket to be treated differently from all the others she'd purchased over the years. Family members say she always considered the lottery a family investment. Ms. Martinez's representatives have declined to comment. Lora didn't have representatives. She didn't have a publicist or a lawyer specializing in media relations. She had a regular attorney who handled the lottery claim and a financial advisor who helped manage the money, but neither of them was prepared for this level of scrutiny, this public dissection of private grief. By Thursday evening, the story had gone viral on 3 different social media platforms. Ike, Lottery Sisters was trending on Twitter, with thousands of people debating the ethics of keeping found money versus sharing windfall wealth with family. TikTok users were making videos about lottery etiquette and family loyalty. Instagram, influencers were posting philosophical treatises about money and love disguised as inspirational quotes over sunset photos. Lora's phone rang at 8:30. Dr. Valdez checking on her patient. "How are you holding up?" the therapist asked without preamble. "I feel like I'm drowning," Lora admitted. "Everyone has an opinion about my life, my choices, my family. Strangers are telling me I'm a terrible person based on a newspaper article. That got half the facts wrong." What facts did they get wrong? The question stopped Lora short. She'd been so focused on feeling victimized by the media coverage that she hadn't actually analyzed what was factually incorrect versus what was simply unflattering. They made it sound like I'm hoarding money while my family suffers. But I've tried to help them. I offered to pay off Elena's mortgage, to fund college accounts for all the kids, to help Carlos expand his business. They won't let me. And the part about your mother's intentions? Lora closed her eyes, remembering her mother's weekly ritual, the way Maria Elena would fold the lottery ticket carefully and say, "For the family, mija. When we win, it's for the family." She did always say it was for the family, Lora whispered. But she never won before. She never had to make the actual decision about how to distribute it. So what do you think she would have done? The question haunted Lora through another sleepless night. She wandered her empty mansion, touching expensive furniture and imported fixtures, wondering if her mother would recognize the daughter she'd raised in the woman who now lived surrounded by luxury, while her family suffered across the street. Friday morning brought new complications. A man named Derek Walsh showed up at her door at 7 a.m., introducing himself as a documentary filmmaker interested in telling her story. "I'm not looking to exploit your situation," he said through the intercom, his voice professionally earnest. "I want to show the human side of sudden wealth, the way it changes families, the impossible choices people have to make. Your story could help others in similar situations." Lora didn't buzz him in, but she listened from her window as he pitched his project to the air, performing for the other reporters who'd been camped on her street since yesterday. "This isn't about taking sides," Derek continued. "This is about understanding how money changes everything, how even the most loving families can be torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Lora Martinez isn't a villain or a victim. She's a human being trying to navigate an impossible situation." His words felt like the first fair assessment she'd heard in days, but she still didn't open the door. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. The breaking point came Friday afternoon. Lora was attempting to read in her library, trying to lose herself in a novel that had nothing to do with lottery tickets or family feuds, when she heard shouting from across the street. Through her window, she saw a crowd of people on Elena's front lawn, some carrying signs reading "Share the Wealth" and "Family First," others with opposing messages like "Her money, her choice" and "Stop the greed." The protesters had found them. Somehow, the story had attracted the attention of people with strong opinions about wealth inequality, family obligations, and social justice. They'd turned Willowbrook Lane into a battleground for causes that had nothing to do with the Martinez family and everything to do with their own political beliefs. Elena's children were trapped inside the house, their mother peeking through curtains at strangers who'd invaded their quiet neighborhood to make a point about issues they barely understood. David's face appeared at an upstairs window, pale and confused, watching adults argue about his family like they were characters in a story rather than real people with real pain. That image, her nephew's frightened face at the window, finally broke something inside Lora that had been bending under pressure for months. She called 911 first, reporting the disturbance and requesting police intervention to clear the protesters from private property. Then she called Amanda at the hospital, her former supervisor who'd been texting supportive messages all week. "Amanda, I need a favor. Can you conference call the hospital's media relations team? I want to make a statement, and I need it to be handled professionally." "Of course, honey. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to tell the truth. All of it." The police arrived within 10 minutes, professionally dispersing the protesters and establishing a perimeter around both houses. The reporters were pushed back to the public sidewalk, their cameras still rolling but their access limited. In the sudden quiet that followed, Lora saw Elena's front door open slightly, her sister's face appearing for just a moment before disappearing again. That evening, St. Mary's Hospital issued a press release on official letterhead. Former St. Mary's Hospital employee Lora Martinez will hold a press conference Monday morning at 10 a.m. to address recent media coverage regarding her lottery win and family situation. Ms. Martinez will take questions from local media only. This will be her only public statement on this matter. The announcement was picked up by every local news outlet within hours. By Saturday morning, it was trending nationally. The lottery sister who'd been hiding behind her mansion gates was finally going to tell her side of the story. Lora spent the weekend preparing, writing notes she'd probably never use, practicing answers to questions she hoped no one would ask. She called Dr. Valdez for a crisis session, needing professional guidance on how to navigate public confession without destroying what little remained of her relationship with her siblings. "What's your goal here?" Dr. Valdez asked during their Sunday afternoon session. "What do you hope to accomplish with this press conference?" "I want people to stop camping on my sister's lawn. I want her children to feel safe in their own home. I want—" Lora's voice broke. "I want to find a way back to my family, even if it means losing everything else. And if they still won't forgive you after you tell your truth publicly?" Lora was quiet for a long moment, staring out Dr. Valdez's window at a world that suddenly felt too big and too small at the same time. Then, "At least I'll know I tried everything," she said finally. "At least I'll know I chose them over my pride." Sunday night, she sat in her empty dining room with David's crayon drawings spread on the table in front of her, his innocent question echoing in her mind. Why can't we be a family anymore? Tomorrow, she would try to answer that question for the whole world to hear. Tonight, she would pray to her mother's God for the wisdom to say the right words and the strength to accept whatever consequences came after. Across the street, Elena's house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen window, a beacon in the darkness that felt both impossibly distant and as close as hope. Years, Christmas mornings when they were children, birthday parties where their mother had made elaborate cakes from box mixes and love, quiet moments of Maria Elena teaching her daughters to braid their hair or showing her sons how to tie their shoes. "Look how proud she was of all of you," Derek's voiceover continued as the camera showed their mother at Laura's nursing school graduation, tears streaming down her face as she applauded. Every achievement, every milestone, every moment of joy, she saw it as proof that her sacrifices had meaning. The film showed the lottery ticket itself, the numbers that had changed everything, and then cut to interviews with each sibling talking about what their mother's weekly ritual had meant to them. "She used to say the numbers were us," Carlos said, on screen, his voice thick with emotion. "Our birthdays, the date she came to America. She was betting on us every week, betting that we'd always be together." Elena wiped tears from her eyes as her own interview played. "I was so angry at Lora for so long. But watching this, remembering who we used to be, I think Mommy would be heartbroken to see what we did to each other." The documentary showed the reconciliation, the press conference, the family working together on the endowment. But it also showed the scars, the months of silence, the children's confusion, the way sudden wealth had nearly destroyed something that had taken Maria Elena Martinez 43 years to build. In the end, Derek concluded as the film showed, recent footage of all 5 siblings at the hospital, working together but somehow different than before. The Martinez family learned that some things are worth more than money. But they also learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply makes the future possible. The credits rolled over home video footage of Maria Elena at her last Easter, surrounded by all her children and grandchildren, laughing as little. Tommy tried to crack an egg on her head instead of dyeing it. Her joy was infectious, filling the room with light that seemed to reach through the screen and touch everyone watching. When the film ended, they sat in Elena's living room in comfortable silence, processing what they'd seen, remembering who they'd been before grief and money had complicated everything. "She'd be proud of us now," Sophia said finally. "Not because of the money or the endowment or the documentary, because we found our way back to each other." "Think so?" Miguel asked, always the youngest, always seeking reassurance. "I know so," Lora said quietly, "because we chose love. It took us too long, but we chose love." Outside, the first warm evening of spring was settling over Willowbrook Lane. Across the street, Laura's former mansion sat empty, a sold sign in the yard, the proceeds earmarked for the scholarship fund that would help other families access the health care Maria Elena had struggled to afford. Elena's children burst through the back door, fresh from playing in the yard, their voices filling the house with the kind of noise their grandmother had always said was the sound of life being lived fully. "Can Tia Lora stay for dinner?" David asked, throwing his arms around his aunt without waiting for permission. "Can she help with my science project?" Maria added. "Can she read stories?" Tommy demanded, climbing onto Laura's lap as if the months of separation had never happened. Elena looked at her sister, the woman who'd almost lost everything trying to save everyone, who'd learned the difference between helping and controlling, between loving and letting go. "She can stay as long as she wants," Elena said. "This is her home too." And for the first time since Maria Elena Martinez had bought her last lottery ticket, Lora felt like she'd finally won something that mattered. If Laura's journey touched your heart, if you felt the weight of impossible choices, the pain of family fractured by good intentions, or the hope that love can heal even the deepest wounds, then you understand why stories like this matter.